Hello everyone, welcome to this interesting lecture. Today we are going to be focusing on sentence transformation, how to change active and passive sentences. Before we proceed on the lecture, I'd like to crave your indulgence to subscribe to this channel. You may not need as much energy as this young lad is using to subscribe. To subscribe to this channel is just a click away. Just click on the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can receive interesting and educative videos from this channel. When you talk about the active voice is used when the focus is on the subject or the agent. The subject is also referred to as the agent, that is the performer of the action. So the active voice is used when the subject or when the focus is on the subject or agent of the main verb. Now the subject is the person or thing doing the main verb. In the active voice, the subject of the sentence does the action. Let's see an example. John painted the house last week. We have four elements here: the subject, the verb, the object, and the adverbial. Now, John is the subject. The verb here is painted, and the receiver of the action of the verb is the house. So, in the active voice, the subject performs an action directly on the object. Let's see more examples. Millions of people use the internet every day. Millions of people here is our subject, and use is the verb, and the internet is the object. So millions of people perform this action, use on the internet every day. A strong storm destroyed many houses in the village. Only 6 students passed the test. Let's look at the passive voice. The passive voice is used when the person or the thing affected by the main verb becomes the focus. In the passive voice, the subject of the sentence receives the action, unlike it is in the case of the active voice. Let's see an example. The house was painted last week. The house here, which used to be the object, has now become the subject. So was painted is our verb, and last week is the adverbial. So we have the house was painted last week. Note that the object of the active sentence, that is the house, is now the subject of the passive sentence. Let's see more examples. The internet is used by millions of people every day. Many houses in the village were destroyed by a strong storm. The test was passed by only 6 students. In these sentences, our previous objects have now become the subjects, and that is how you know a passive structure. Let's look at the use or the uses of the passive voice. The passive voice can be used in certain situations. In the first one, when we do not know who did the action, we will be forced to use the passive voice. For instance, the documents were stolen. Now, the identity of the agent is unknown. So in this case, since the agent is not known, then we have to use the passive voice. The second instance where we use the passive voice is when the receiver of the action is more important. For instance, the pyramids were built nearly 5,000 years ago by the ancient Egyptians. Here, we want to emphasize pyramids more than the ancient Egyptians. The passive voice is also used when we do not wish to state who did the action. For instance, an ideal gas, that is air, was heated in a pressure vessel with a volume of 1 liter. Here, we do not care so much about who heated air. All we are concerned about is that air was heated in a pressure vessel, so the agent is unimportant. And the last situation in which we use the passive voice is when stating the identity of the agent is unnecessary. For instance, the president was voted into office. We are not so much concerned about who voted the president as millions of people did that. So it is unnecessary to state the agent here. So the agent is obvious. It's the people who voted the president. So, but the focus is that the president was voted into office. Let's look at the form of the passive voice. In order to change an active voice sentence to a passive voice sentence, there are things you need to take note of and the things you need to do. The first thing is that you should make the object of the active sentence the subject of the passive sentence. Then you make use of the verb to be. To be is a non-modal auxiliary verb. You change the verb to be in the same tense as the main verb of the active sentence. If the verb of the active sentence, especially to be verb, is in the present, it will also reflect in the verb of the passive tense. So you need to use the verb to be. And to be has 8 forms: the is, the am, the was, the were, the are, the be itself, the being, and the being. The passive voice is made with the following: the subject plus the to be form of the verb plus the verb in the past participle form or the perfective form plus the by and then plus the object. You need to note that the active voice object, as we have said, becomes the passive voice subject. In the passive, the main verb is always the past participle. Take note of that. So when you see any sentence with a past participle verb, that sentence is most likely a passive sentence. Here are some active and passive voice examples to elucidate what we have said. Look at the sentences on the left and the ones on the right. On the left, we have the active sentences, while on the right, we have the passive structures. Look at the formation of the active sentences: the subject plus the main verb and plus your object. While on the passive, you have your subject plus to be verb plus the past participle plus by and then plus the object. Let's see the following examples. Bees make honey. Then you have honey is made by bees. James Cameron directed Titanic. Titanic was directed by James Cameron. People drink champagne on New Year's Eve. Champagne is drunk on New Year's Eve. Alex is repairing Bill's bicycle. Bill's bicycle is being repaired by Alex. Take note of the tense. Chefs use these machines to mix the ingredients. These machines are used to mix the ingredients. The renovated restaurant in 2004. The restaurant was renovated in 2004. The teachers informed the students that the class had been cancelled. The students were informed that the class had been cancelled. Let's look at the form of the passive voice that has the present tense, that is the is or the are form of the to be verb plus the past participle of the main verb. In which situations do we use them? We use this when we are talking of processes. For instance, first the apples are picked, then they are cleaned, and finally they are packed and shipped to the market. The metal sheeting was heated and bent into shape before being cooled, polished, and finally painted. We also use this form of the passive voice when we are giving rules. For instance, the use of scrap paper is not permitted. All students are hereby informed that the only recognized designated places of worship on the campus are the Chapel of Faith, St. Albert's Catholic Church, and the mosque. We also use the in general thoughts or opinions and beliefs. For instance, New York is considered the most diverse city in the US. It is believed that Amelia Earhart's plane crashed in the Pacific Ocean. Hungarian is seen as one of the world's most difficult languages to learn. Skin cancers are thought to be caused by excessive exposure to the sun. Now, we also have the form of the passive voice in the past tense regarding the use of the modal auxiliary, that is the was or the were, plus the past participle of the main verb. Let's see examples of this. We use this in a history, talking about events in history. For instance, George Washington was elected president in 1788. We also use this in crimes or accidents. For instance, 2 people were killed in a drive-by shooting on Friday night. 10 children were injured when part of the school roof collapsed. Let's look at the form of the passive voice with negative. That is the subject plus the negative of to be verb plus the past participle and by and the object. Let's look at the statements that we have on the left. They are active, positive, and the one on the right, they are statements that are passive, negative. For instance, bees make honey. Here you have honey is not made by wasps. Now what we are saying is that we are negating the active sentence, and there is a way to do that. You simply follow this rule. That is the subject plus the negative of to be verb plus the past participle plus by and the object. Next example, James Cameron directed Titanic. Titanic wasn't directed by George Lucas. You don't need to put the name of James Cameron again. That will alter the sentence. Alex is repairing Bill's bicycle. Bill's bicycle is not being repaired by Will. Let's look at passive voice in terms of questions. Now you have the sentences on the left and the ones on the right, the active on the left and the passive on the right. Bees make honey. Is honey made by bees? That's a passive question. James Cameron directed Titanic. Was Titanic directed by James Cameron? Take note of the tense, was, because of the verb directed. And the other example, Alex is repairing Bill's bicycle. Is Bill's bicycle being repaired by Alex? Because it's an ongoing situation. Take note that it is only the transitive verb which requires an object that can take 2 voices, while the intransitive verb, which does not require an object, can only accommodate the active voice. Let's say the following sentences. My leg aches. Her body itches. They walk smart. When you look at these sentences, they are all rendered in the active voice. They cannot be rendered in the passive voice. We cannot render any of the examples above in the passive form because the verbs are intransitive. Do you mind giving them a try? You will come up with funny or ludicrous sentences. So it is not proper to say aches my leg or itches my body or smart the walk. What we are saying in essence, in effect, is that any sentence that contains an intransitive verb cannot be transformed into the passive form. Thank you so much for listening to this lecture on sentence transformation. I'd like you to subscribe to this channel once again and see you around some other time.